everybody. Welcome to the Red Deer Museum and Art Gallery's Easter event. I'm your host, Saya. I'll be taking you through a couple of really fun projects that we can do, some really cute Easter themes, lots of bunnies and eggs to kind of bring in some of those spring feelings. The weather's been really nice, so it is actually feeling like spring, which is quite great. So for everyone who's tuning in, thank you so much for taking an interest in our program.
Sorry, I'm just checking the screen there. All right, so let's hop to it. Before we dive into our art projects, the first thing I'd like to do is talk to everyone a little bit about some of the elements of art. Because, I know a lot of people tend to think of art as an inherent talent that people have, but the truth is, it is a skill that you can learn, and there are some really, really basic foundational things that can help you make your art better or help you learn to look at art and know what you're looking for in a good art piece. So, I've got a few things to show you. We have this great reference here called Find Art Elements in Your Home. Don't worry too much about reading it on this screen because I'll be walking you through it verbally. Art elements are all around us. They're really easy to find. One you can think of as color. Take a look around you and see what colors you can find. And another handy tool when it comes to color is this handy dandy thing called a color wheel. And what the color wheel does is gives you the option to look at what colors you're going to get if you say mix two colors together. So for instance, on this side of the color wheel, we've got yellow and we've got a little header on our spinning wheel that says with blue added. And if you look at where the line takes us, it shows us a green square. So yellow plus blue equals green. Most of us learned that in elementary school, so it's pretty handy. So when we think of Easter colors now, often what we're thinking about are pastel colors. So, let's think about it for a moment. What are pastel colors? They're kind of light, we're thinking some baby pinks, some seafoam greens, some very light sky blues. So how can we get pastel colors with our color wheel? We're going to go to the little header that says with white added. And here we can mix it with all of our colors. So we're looking at this little window here. So we get a nice pastel yellow if we add white to yellow. We get this gorgeous light green if we add white to yellow green. And oh, I am a big fan of these pastel blue greens, little light teal. Something else in color theory, if we, sorry, I took it out of the camera. Another thing in color theory are things called complementary colors. So again, think in Easter colors, we got our yellow and purple that contrast each other. And what you might not know is those are complementary colors. So we're looking at our color wheel here, right? And we have two arrows that we're looking at right here. And complementary colors are colors that are just straight across from each other on the color wheel. So let's point our arrow at yellow and see where that takes us. Would you look at that? Purple, well, on this it says violet, but purple, violet, same difference. Violet, yellow, complementary colors. Just for fun, let's say, what do we get at the opposite of blue? Orange is a complementary color to blue. Or red and green are complementary colors. There's our Christmas colors. So, of course, now when you're looking at colors in the world around you, you can sort of think about what the complementary color would be, how you could make a pastel color with it by adding white. So, on to our next elements of art. What about texture? What do we think when we think texture? Perhaps you're thinking about a fluffy teddy bear. Perhaps we're thinking about, I don't know, maybe you've got a really fuzzy jacket or socks. But when we're talking about art, how do we communicate texture? So this image right here is a wood engraving print by Alberta artist James Agrell Smith. I'm gonna try holding this up. We're gonna see how well our webcam holds up. I think it might be a little fuzzy, but we have, I think this is an animal pelt of some sort. And you can see how by using line and carving, he's made the feeling of texture in his art piece. You know, you're looking at this and you can look at it and it makes your brain think about the texture of fur. So again, think about textures you can find in your house and think about what kind of mark making you could do on a page to communicate that. Another element of art is space. Now, a good way to learn about space when we're looking at art is to think about the spaces in between things. So this sculpture is a really great example. This is by Daryl Collier, and it is a sculpture. It's called Treadle Operated Unicoast Cycle. Wow, that is a mouthful. And so when we're thinking about space, especially with this as a 3D object, we're looking at the space in between the spokes, in between the handlebars. And even though this is a 2D image of a 3D object, the fact that there are spaces in between move our eyes around the piece. So that's our lesson in space. So if you're at home thinking about where can you find examples of space in your home, perhaps consider the spaces between chair legs or between the leaves of a plant. So that's our little lesson on space. Another very important art element is repetition. So in this piece of art called Love Your Neighbor by Janet Mitchell, I quite like this piece. It's so vibrant, it's so lively, and we have a lot of repeating shapes and a lot of repeating colors. So it's a really great twofer here. And we get a sense of motion throughout the piece because of the repeating patterns. We also see space. There is an example of space in between all of our shapes. And so repetition creates harmony. So when we have repeating elements in an art piece, it ties it all together. And we're going to be exploring that in our first project, as well as in our second project, actually. Both of our projects today, lots of repetition. Now, shapes. We have all kinds of different shapes in art. Maybe when you say shapes, you're thinking squares, you're thinking circles. But what about organic shapes? Often when we think of shape, we think of geometric shapes, which are, you know, your squares, your circles, your triangles, your diamonds, things like what we would see in this lovely piece by Peter Field. It's called Landscape Quilt Number 3. And of course, we have some great examples of pastel colors. We have some great examples of repetition. We also have some great examples of geometric shape. Here are our triangles, our diamonds with little diamonds inside of them. Diamonds and squares, same thing. Cool. But organic shapes now are also a kind of shape, but they look a little more, I don't know, not quite so boxed in. They are perhaps shapes you would find in nature, such as these flowers in a piece called To the World Unfold by Vivian Bierfelder. I hope I said that right. This is a watercolor piece that shows some really lovely flower petals. And so those are organic shapes. So again, look around. What are some organic shapes you can find in the world around you? Technically, just about anything's an organic shape. Maybe it's your face in the mirror. Maybe it's your dog. Or what about, let's say, an Easter egg is an organic shape. A little hard to see here, but that is a great segue into our first project. So if you have your supplies at the ready, let's get them together and jump into these wonderful Cubist-inspired bunnies. I'll show you an example of the finished product of what we're going to end up with really quick before we start. So this project is great fun. We've got this cute little bunny. You can almost hardly see him on the camera though, because we're creating this sort of elusive mirage using organic shapes. And it's a bunny and it's eggs. What came first, the bunny or the egg? Well, in this art piece, oh goodness. I seem to have misplaced my paper. That's very unfortunate. But you know what? We can improvise, and I'm going to use the back of this page. I'm good. We got it. Now for this project, you could start with either your egg shapes or you can start with your bunny shapes. I'm going to go with my bunny shapes. And thankfully, to make circles, you can use all sorts of things you can find around your house. You're going to want one shape for the bunny butt that's going to be larger, and one circle for your bunny's head that's going to be a little bit smaller. So here I am, starting with this cute bunny butt, and I've got a pencil handy. So I'm just going to trace that circle. So there's our first one. And I'm going to trace my next circle, but I'm not going to trace all the way. I'm going to stop when we get to the bunny's body. So I got this second circle on the go here. The lines are a little tough to see, but I'm going to go over them with Sharpie. So give me just a moment and we'll be absolutely fine. Oh, we've got some black paper coming in here. Gotta love having wonderful coworkers who are willing to help out when we do these projects. Here we are. A little more contrast going on. So we have our circles. Now I'm going to draw our bunny ears, and that's where we're going to get into these organic shapes. So I've got one bunny ear. And this one's going to have kind of a floppy ear, kind of flopping down. Now we can take our handy dandy Sharpie and we can either freehand go around, or if you are a perfectionist like I am, we can use our circles once again to make our Sharpie lines. Tracing that around. Ooh, I want to liven up this line a little bit right here. Getting it lined up, lined up, lined up. I love tracing things with Sharpie. It's so satisfying, seeing those nice bold lines cropping up on the page, nice and symmetrical. Our circles are symmetrical. Ooh, I forgot to talk about symmetry when we were doing the art talk, but symmetry is a form of balance too. When things, say you just split them right down the middle, they'll be the same on both sides. Asymmetrical means they're a little different on both sides, but perhaps they still balance each other out, which we can find an example of in our bunny ears. So we've got a little mix of symmetry and asymmetry in our project here. Symmetry because we're using these circles that are perfectly symmetrical. Asymmetry because our ears on our cute little bunny are a little different on each side. And then last thing is you want to give your bunny a cute little fluffy cottontail. I'm just going to freehand it because that's pretty easy. All right, so the question that we are trying to answer with this piece, what came first, the bunny or the egg? In our case, it's going to be the bunny. So our next step is to take an egg shape. I've got a paper cutout that I just sort of freehanded and then cut. I'm going to start tracing it in pencil quite lightly. and they're gonna overlap. And I'm not too worried about where the lines are ending up. I'm just kind of letting them end up wherever my piece of paper lands. If you want to add some physicality to this project, you can just throw it on the paper, see where it lands, trace it wherever it lands. Just do whatever makes you happy, right? So we're layering, and you can go off the page, as you can see here. I'm going to throw in an egg, and it's going to only be halfway on the page. So remember to use that quite a bit, actually, because, you know, if it's all just focused in the middle, you're not going to get that sense of balance. But if you have, you know, some of them poking in, making an appearance from off the page, that's going to give you a lot more visual interest to your art piece. It's going to make it a lot more fun to look at. I think I use the term visual interest in these lives a lot, but I don't know that I've ever described what it means. So to me, visual interest is what draws your eye to the piece, what makes it pleasing to look at, or if not pleasing, at least interesting. Because, you know, sometimes art pieces you don't like can still have visual interest. So we're tracing our eggs, having them go off the page. I'm starting to get lots of very fun overlapping lines. Going to try to bring it a little closer to the camera so you can see. I think I've just about got, oh, whoops, I didn't finish tracing this one. I think I've just about got all the eggs I want on my page. I'm going to throw in one or two more, just because I feel like we have some spaces that are a little bit sparse, a little sad. They just want some more eggies in them. All right, so now we've kind of got this neat kaleidoscope of shapes happening. Our next goal is going to be to have some fun coloring them in with our oil pastels. So again, oil pastels as a tool, but they can also be pastel colors, just like this wonderful light blue that I'm going to start my project with. So my goal with this, with the coloring aspect, is to make sure each section is colored and that no two of the colors that are the same are touching. So this is going to be a fun challenge. We're going to go in between the lines and see what we end up with. So I'm following the lines of the eggs, but I'm also following the lines of the bunny. So we've kind of got these light pencil lines that are going to be drawn over when we get our pastels all blocked in. But we're also going to have these bold lines where we can see our bunny. Going to throw in a little bit of, ooh, this gray kind of makes a silver. I know a lot of people probably don't think of gray as an Easter color, but you know, sometimes you throw in some of those more subdued colors and it really balances out our brights. Ooh, what color do I want to put here? I think, oh, you know what? I have to say, a combination I'm a big fan of is pink and gray. So I'm going to throw some pink right next to my gray. I think I'm going to throw a little bit of pink in right here too. Right along our bunny. I'm just going to use my nail to scratch away a bit of the pastel so I can reveal that Sharpie line. Now I think I need a little bit of yellow to spice things up a bit. Oh, whoa, you know what? That yellow is a little spicier than I wanted. I think I'm going to go with this lighter one. That's okay. Happy accidents, as good old Bob Ross says, they happen when we're making art. But pastels are a very forgiving medium, so I can just go back in with a similar color, and look, you can't even tell that I used that kind of dark yellow. I can just go right on in and have this light yellow instead, and we're all good. Just rolling right along. That's starting to look kind of fun. Let's throw some purple into the mix because we wouldn't really have Easter colors without purple now, would we? That one's a little more pink than I want, so I'm going to switch over to this guy. Yeah, there we go. And I think I'm actually going to throw a little bit of that purple over here too, next to the blue. I love the combination of purple and blue. Those jewel tones are just wonderful. Oh, let's see. Let's throw a bit of green on here too. I'm going to start up here so that I'm not dragging my hands through my pastels. Some of that nice spring grass green, so pretty. A little bit down here too. Maybe gonna throw some of that down in this corner as well. And so that's roughly what our project is looking like for now. But when we're done, again, it'll, oops, look something a little more akin to this. So your finished product will be super vibrant and you'll have all of these wonderful, super fun overlapping shapes, but not overlapping colors. So again, you know, you can take your time after this broadcast is done to color it in. Please don't feel like you have to rush along with me as I'm doing the work because, you know, I've kind of got some backups so that I can show you finished products. So I'm gonna put our sweet little eggs and bunnies away and I'm gonna get us started on our next project. So luckily I get to keep this nice set of rainbow organized pastels next to me. And we're gonna move into using some pastels to do a resist technique with watercolor paints. Gonna open up our palette. We're gonna get our brushes at the ready. I'll be back in one moment and we will start. All right, so our second project is another exploration in repetition. We've got a lot of pattern here as well. And I'm going to teach you one of my favorite watercolor techniques that is just absolutely oh so fun to do. And we're going to create these beautiful Easter eggs with some really gorgeous pastel colors. So to start, we're going to want to set up our station. And we're going to have our pastels, our oil pastels. Chalk pastels will not do the trick. We're going to want some of our paper towel to clean up any messes and to add a little texture as we lay our background. We're going to want our lovely palette of watercolor paints. And of course we need water, because those watercolors won't be working if we don't have water. And as well, we need a piece of watercolor paper. If you don't have a plastic board to tape it down to, that's okay. Ultimately, your project will still work. However, we use cut pieces of a building supply called coroplast, which is short for corrugated plastic, because it's got these little kind of, if you've ever looked at the side of cardboard, there's sort of little bubbles in between them. So we've got that, and I've used painter's tape to secure it to the board. And what that helps with is when paper gets wet, it likes to warp and it likes to contract, which means it likes to come together, and that'll pull your paper really close together and it'll kind of make it bubble up. So we tape it down to avoid that. But again, worst case, you know, you can always just kind of bend it at the end to flatten it out. So to start, we're going to very, very, very lightly, using preferably an H pencil. If you see the little 4H on your pencil, H pencil leads are the lightest because the leads are very hard, so they don't deposit a whole lot of the pigment onto your page. So very lightly, we're going to try to make the most symmetrical Easter egg that we can possibly muster up. And you know, we're thinking about the shape of the egg. It's kind of pointy up top, like a gentle rounded point. And it is nice and round on the bottom. And that's kind of its own sort of visual balance, you know. You get a nice round bottom on the egg you're drawing, and it sort of makes it look like heavier on the bottom, like it'll sit nicely. And so I'm taking my time, gently sketching these lines until I get a shape that I am happy with. And of course, if you're having some trouble, you can erase your egg as well. I'm pretty happy with this shape. Just about ready to trace on over it. I think that looks all right. Needs a little bit more volume there, and I think we're good. All right, wonderful. So we can put our pencil to the side. And now that we have our egg shape, we can go in with a pastel and trace the outside outline of our egg. I'm going to go with this lovely sky blue. So you can start thinking about what kind of colors you want to work with and what kind of color palette. Maybe you're thinking about those complementary colors. Maybe you're thinking about colors that are all in the same range, like cool colors like blues and purples and greens. Or, you know, feel free to use hot colors like really vibrant yellows and fiery reds and juicy oranges. However, I'm going to go with our standard Easter colors just because that's the project we're doing. Going to have lots of nice pastels, little pink, little blue, little purple. And so this, we want to make sure that this line is really nice and pronounced. Because what's going to happen is when we start painting, which we'll do after we're done with our pastel drawing part, is the oil pastels will act as a barrier for the watercolor paint. Because these pastels are oil-based and oil and water push away from each other, that's how that works. And that's why it's called the resist technique. You can also buy a material called resist fluid for watercolor painting. That stuff's really cool. You can kind of peel it up off your paper once the paint is dried. But this is a little more low tech, but it gets the job done very simple and effectively. So we've got our outline. Now let's start thinking about what kind of lines we want to decorate our egg with. And something to keep in mind is that when we are drawing on a curved object, such as an egg, if we're trying to give the illusion of the depth and form of the object, we're not going to just draw a straight line across, because that's going to look flat. And we want it to look kind of nice and curved like an egg. So our lines are going to be a little bit curved. Think about drawing a smiley face, like the mouth of a smiley face. I'm going to start up there. And when we're going through our lines, I'm going to use a couple different colors, but something to keep in mind as well is that you want to repeat the same colors a few times throughout the egg so that you get this really nice sense of balance, visual balance, because the way having the same color in multiple places draws your eye around the art piece is really, really powerful. It's a very great tool to use to affect how the people viewing your art will look at it. So, you know, if you want to draw attention to one spot, perhaps you'll put a color that you won't see in the rest of the piece. But what we want to do with this is have a nice, harmonious mix. So we're going to have a little bit of everything everywhere. I think I want to put a really, really, really big, bold stripe of this baby blue. Just a really thick one right here. I'm going to color that in. Definitely try to be careful not to drag your hands through your pastels either, because oil pastels they're pretty easy to clean up for the most part, but you get them on your hands while you're drawing and then you can get them all smudged all over your piece, and that's not something we want. So now I think I would like to go in with a little bit of, let's use a white pastel, because that's always fun. And this is a great way to show the resist technique, because, you know, when you first put your white pastel down, it's not going to look like much. It's just gonna look like nothing, really. But once we start painting, it's gonna show up as a really great contrast to our paint that we'll be adding. So definitely don't be scared to get bold and do that white on white. Let's see, I'm adding another stripe here. Let's do some up here too. Again, I am kind of trying to evenly distribute the colors and lines all throughout this eggy so that it is balanced. Eggy sounds kind of funny, I don't know. Why do we do that? Why do we attach the Y to the end of words? Weird human things. And let's see. Oh, let's get some paint going. Let's throw it in between our blue lines here. Now this is starting to come together. We're getting a little bit of contrast because pink is a little closer to our palette of warm colors, whereas blue is a cool color. Gonna overlay some pink with our white stripe here. And, you know, I've got lots of lines going, but I haven't really thrown in any other shapes, so let's do some little polka dots. And again, we're really hammering that repetition in this piece. I think I'm going to put some more down here. Cool. I think I'm good on the pink. Ooh, let's throw some dark blue in the mix. I don't think we have enough dark blue. Some more contrast with our darks and lights. Just looks absolutely beautiful. And when you're working with oil pastels, sometimes you got to peel that pesky paper back so that you can really get the most out of your pastel. Because sometimes it'll kind of crowd your tool while you're drawing, and that's just no good. So we're getting some more circles happening here. Looking real nice. Where else could we use a blue stripe? I think we need some somewhere in the middle. Oh yeah, that bold blue is just gorgeous. Oops, broken pastel. Moving along. And I'm going to throw some blue lines between these two white stripes too. Get some vertical lines going because we've got lots of horizontals, but not a whole lot of verticals. And for any young ones watching who don't know the terms horizontal and vertical, horizontal is a flat line that goes side to side like this, and vertical is a big up and down stripe that goes up and down like this. So that's a thing you know now. All right, and you know we're really missing, what we're really missing is some purple. So let's get some of that in there. Gonna throw a little bit there. Gonna throw a little in there. And I think we need some zigzags. Gonna do some zigging and zagging. Oh yeah. And look how think about how it changes the way your eye moves around the picture when we add different shapes in and when we add different colors to different spaces. Every time you change something in an art piece, it becomes something quite different each time, and that's something I really love about art, especially seeing progression of an art piece. Because you'll get some art pieces that sort of have this unfinished look, and those can look really nice as well. So it's really all about when you're making a piece of art I think that's why it's so hard as an artist sometimes to tell when a piece is done, because, you know, sometimes things look good in this sort of raw, unfinished state. Like this Easter egg. It wouldn't be horrible if we just did the pastels and didn't use the watercolors. However, you know, sometimes you just really gotta take that extra final step, and you get something far more awesome if you just put in that little extra bit of effort or add one more material. Gonna throw a bit of purple in at the bottom. All right. And I think I'm gonna add some little white triangles as well. That's gonna look really cool when we paint it. And we're almost at the painting stage because I've just about got this whole thing just filled right up. This is a very fun, meditative project. Kind of lets you, any kind of art piece that involves patterns really sort of lets you zone out while you're making repeating patterns. And, you know, I think that's really good for us to do sometimes, because sometimes the world is very, very fast, very, very fast paced. So when you just sit down to make repeating patterns and just let yourself go on autopilot, it feels good. Brilliant. So we have got our pastels laid down here. Now I'm going to take a piece of paper towel and just give it a quick little gentle wipe. I'm not pressing at all here, but sometimes your pastels will leave these little residue pieces that you sort of gotta sweep off. So just treat your paper towel like a broom almost and just give it a little sweep, because you don't want to smudge it either. And now we get to hop into this really fun technique called wet on wet. And so what wet on wet is as a technique is when you dip your paint brush into clean water. You don't want to touch any paint yet. You just want to dab, 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 dab your brush like I'm doing. And then just spread water over your paper, getting it nice and saturated, not too saturated. You don't want a river of water that's gonna jump on over the walls of your oil pastels, because if you get enough water, the pastel barrier just won't work. If you spill a whole jar of water, the water's not gonna care, because it's gonna be kind of like, a big ocean wave that can go over a wall. So you just want to get it nice and damp, but not too saturated. However, what that's going to do when we do get paint on our brush, it's going to allow it to flow ever so nicely. So I'm just making sure that I've got my whole page nice and covered here. And then I'm going to take my brush and let's do this. I'm going to dip it into my purple. Maybe I want to mix my purple a bit. I think I do. Gonna get that. And whoop. Oh, so fun. Oh, I'm not even gonna start by brushing it on. I was going to, but try just doing this. You can see the motion I'm doing is I'm sort of jabbing my paintbrush at the paper and allowing these really cool little tie-dye spots to show up. And the wet on wet technique allows it to just spread. It's so, oh, I love watching it. It's so fun. So that's going to look really lovely. I'm going to mix a little bit of a different hue of purple in here, kind of a darker one that's got a little different, a little more blue to it. Something for those who haven't gone to art school and learned a whole bunch of color theory is that you get different types of blue paint. So say you're at an art store and you're looking at this lovely wall of tubes of paint. You'll see two different sorts of blue. One is called a phthalo blue, starts with a P, kind of like pterodactyl. And phthalo blue is a blue that has a more green tint to it. And then you've got your ultramarine blue. And what that is blue that has a more purple base. So it's important to know the difference between those depending on the art piece you're making, because they look very, very, very different, even though they're both blue. So we've got this nice background happening here. And you can kind of see a similar thing with your purples too. Like I've kind of got two purples going, and one is a very blue purple, this one that I'm dabbing in here right now. And then my other one, it's got a little more of a red. It's a bit more of a red purple. Although once you mix them together, it all just looks purple. So we've got some nice color mix going on here. Very pretty. You can also just take a clean brush, and if there's somewhere you'd like to add a bit more texture, you can just drop fresh water on there, and that'll give you some neat flowy textures. Another way you can get some nice background texture is crumple up a little bit of paper towel and just sort of dab it, not all the way down, but see how it's kind of crumpled here. Just dab it on in there, and it gives you this sort of icicle frosty look, like when you see those gorgeous frost patterns on the sidewalk in the early mornings of winter. And it's going to remove the paint in some ways. It's going to soak a bit of the water up, but it gives us this really nice crystalline pattern. So I'm really liking that. I think I'm going to dab around this a little more and call that good. Wonderful. And so we're going to go in with a fresh brush. This one is a little bit more pointed, a little more of a rounded tip. And same thing, wet on wet. I'm going to get my brush watered up a little. And now I'm going to start painting water onto the egg. And I'm just going to go over, I'm trying to go in between my lines a little bit. But if I get water over my lines, that really does not matter. Just trying to get it in between everything. Taking my time to make sure that I'm saturating everything that isn't covered by my oil pastels. I think the colors we're going to choose to paint the egg are going to look so nice, especially in between these zigzags. Zigging and zagging. Oops, I had a little purple paint there. That's okay, you can't really tell. Once I add my other color of paint, you know, you're really hardly going to be able to tell. And so I've got my Easter egg saturated, and I am a big fan of a nice greeny teal to contrast with purple. All about those jewel tones, I am. And it's just flowing so nicely. And now you can even paint over your pastels a bit. It's probably gonna soak up a little bit of the color, but not too much. Not enough that you'll eliminate the pastel. It's not opaque enough. So opaque is sort of, if you're looking through a door, not a window. A door is opaque, a window is translucent. So our paint is not opaque, you can see through it like a window. So if you get a bit of your paint on your pastel, that's fine. Getting in between all those lines. Actually, you know what? Maybe we even want hints of our teal color to pop up between the little spaces where our pastels are. Let's try it. Gonna add some over my blue and a little over this white stripe here. Oh yeah, getting it all the way down. Look at that, just fun. Lots of fun colors. And again, I've got a little bit of surplus paint, a little bit extra, so I'm just gonna dab down on that and peel it up. Oh yeah, that is some nice coloring. It's a little lighter than I wanted, so you know, if your paint ends up a little too light, you can always go over it again with a little more paint and a little less water, just to thicken up the spots where it's a bit too light for your liking. Again, watercolor is great because it's such a forgiving medium. You can really fix it pretty easily for the most part if you're doing a nice simple project like this. And see, it was a little too light at first, but I've gone in with a little bit more paint. Now we have this good saturated, gorgeous teal hue. So I'm just finishing up, getting that in there. And a little more on the bottom. Another quick wipe just to tidy it up. And you know what? I think we're going to call this done. And so if you have taped your project down, usually I recommend waiting until your page is fully dry, but I'm just going to do it now so that you can see our finished project. I'm going to very carefully peel the tape up, and I highly recommend going very slow, and don't peel it up fast and high. You want to keep it low to the paper. You can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm not ripping fast because what it can do sometimes is if it's really stuck on there is it'll take chunks of your paper with it, and sometimes instead of creating a nice border, it'll just rip right into your paint, and you don't want that. It'll make you sad, especially if you've worked really hard on your art piece. just about. Oh, moment of truth. Final piece of tape. Fantastic. And now you have your Easter egg project. It's finished, it's lovely, it's full of beautiful pastel colors. And I hope that if you followed along, that you had a great deal of fun today. So before we go, we've got a couple more minutes. We have some recommendations for you as well. Ooh, maybe I'll just keep the Easter egg here so we have a nice picture to look at. So we've got some at-home activities that you can do if you want some Easter fun in the quarantine. One fun thing you can do is an egg race. And so you can get your family together, or you can just do it by yourself, whatever. Grab an egg, maybe a plastic one. Maybe you want to hard boil it so that if it falls, it won't make a mess on your carpet. And you're going to plunk it into a spoon. You can use a big spoon if you don't want it to be too hard, or you can use a little spoon if you're up for a challenge. You just plunk that egg on a spoon and you run as far as you can and as fast as you can. Maybe you want to set up a little finish line to make it a competition with other people in your house. That is a classic game that I think goes back many, many years. I remember it from when I was a kid. We also are going to have on the Red Deer Museum and Gallery's website, our blog, will have this graphic here for the art search, finding elements of art in your home. You know how I was suggesting looking for shapes between chair legs, or to look at the colors of nature around you. That list will be available on the website, and it's something you can do wherever you go. Whether you're at home or out and about, try to keep your eye peeled for art elements. We also will be sending a link, or we'll have a link available on the MAG's website for our virtual escape room. You can also look up on YouTube facts about bunnies for kids, because, you know, we all want to learn about bunnies. They're fluffy, they're cute. Who doesn't love them? And that concludes the Red Deer Museum and Gallery's Easter event. We thank you all for tuning in. Feel free to find us on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, or again, check out our blog on our website, www.reddeermuseum.com. Thank you, everyone. Happy Easter!